She had one request, just one. Don't come to the hospital the day of my husband's open heart surgery. And his mother looked her right in the eye and said, I will not be honoring that. But the hospital wasn't even close to where this started. To understand why Hallie finally went no contact after 25 years, we have to go back to the beginning. Before this, mother-in-law sat down Hallie's 18-year-old daughter and told her something about her father that wasn't hers to tell. We'll get there. Hallie has been married for 25 years, and she describes herself as a very positive person, raised to respect her elders, be kind to everyone, try harder if it's not working. And for 25 years, that's exactly what she did. But somewhere along the way, she started waking up at 3 a.m., heart pounding, chest tight, replaying conversations from 3 days ago, just lying there in the dark while her husband sleeps. For a while, she didn't connect the dots. Like, what is going on? Why do I feel this way? Why am I having panic attacks in the middle of the night? She just thought, okay, sometimes life is stressful. This is just how it is. Keep trying. But from the very beginning of her marriage, there were things that made her really uncomfortable. Her mother-in-law couldn't stop swearing in front of her kids, making comments that would just make Hallie flinch. She would tell stories at the dinner table that were wildly inappropriate for her children. But when Hallie and her husband would try to address it, nothing changed. So Hallie, being a good girl, sucked it up, shook it off, and dreaded every single visit. In those earlier years, they just lived down the road from her mother-in-law, and her mother-in-law had full access to their home. She demanded it. Hallie would come home to find her there, cleaning, moving things around, just making herself at home in her home. And for years, her mother-in-law has been asking for a small house to be put on the backside of their property so she could live with them permanently. But thankfully, Hallie's husband has always said no, because he knew they would never ever have privacy again. Why, do you ask? Well, there was a time when they were all over at her brother-in-law's house helping him out. He was actually at work, but the entire family was over there, and they came in the house to find Hallie's mother-in-law rummaging around in the brother-in-law's private things in an area where she shouldn't be. Hallie and her husband, they just looked at each other. They acknowledged how strange this was. They didn't say a word, but things definitely changed after that. He took the key to their home away from his mom. Hallie's brother-in-law eventually married a really nice woman who had a child from a previous relationship, but the mother-in-law never ever warmed up to this new daughter-in-law. Here's an example. One afternoon, the whole family was gathered for photos, and her mother-in-law announced that she wanted a family photo. So everyone's grouping together, and the mother-in-law pointed to the 6-year-old and said, nope, just the family, you go over there. Hallie immediately stepped away from the group and refused to participate, and thank God that picture was never taken. So this was all just the beginning. Now let's fast forward to the summer of 2024. Hallie's mother-in-law called a meeting. 2 hours, everyone around the table to clear the air. It was her mother-in-law's chance to tell everyone what was wrong with them and why they were doing stuff to the family that she didn't appreciate. So literally everything that didn't go the way she wanted throughout the years, she just puked on the table. Hallie drove home in silence. She just laid awake that night dissecting every single thing her mother-in-law said, and she was trying to figure out, where did she go wrong? How could she have said something different? How could she have fixed it? I mean, she walked into that meeting, sat down at the table thinking like she was trying her best, but then she walked out feeling like she was the problem. 6 months later, Hallie and her husband actually went back to that same table to have another very long conversation, but this time they were explaining their side. But nothing ever changed. And then the winter of 2025 arrived. Hallie's mother-in-law sat down Hallie's 18-year-old daughter and told her that her father had been married before Hallie and before having a family. It was a very dark season in his life that he had held close, and he was waiting for the right moment to tell his children, if ever. And his mom took that from him. This crushed their daughter. I mean, could you imagine? She had so many questions. I mean, her dad was her world, and she found out something so enormous. It was just flopped in her lap. But what Hallie knew that her daughter didn't know is that this wasn't a new topic. Her mother-in-law had been throwing Hallie's husband's past in his face for 27 years. I'm talking every single year, like clockwork, it would come up one way or another. And 99% of the time, Hallie and her husband would quietly have to shuffle their kids out of the room because they were always nearby. 27 years of being shamed for something that happened when his prefrontal cortex wasn't even fully developed. All the while, Hallie's brother-in-law, who has struggled publicly financially, his dark chapter is never discussed. Hallie went over and she sat her mother-in-law down again after this, and they had a conversation, just the two of them. And her mother-in-law denied, deflected, never said I'm sorry, and never acknowledged that what she did had shattered something very precious inside Hallie's daughter. A little while later, Hallie found out that her mother-in-law was actually telling lies to Hallie's brother-in-law. Stories that were completely false, taking away any opportunity for Hallie to actually have a relationship with him. So Hallie sat down one more time with her mother-in-law, just talking one-on-one, and she got nowhere again. A little more time passed, and Hallie's husband gets sick. Her strong, healthy husband goes to the doctor and comes home with the news that just rearranges everything. He has an aneurysm and he needs heart surgery. 3 months before his surgery were the most stressful months of Hallie's life. So she finally arranged a meeting with her mother-in-law and brother-in-law, and she laid it all out as simple and clearly as possible. She said, I will keep you updated on everything, every test, every step along the way, but the day of the surgery, I needed to just be me and my husband. I guess the relationship at this point had gotten so tense that she told them, I just can't be in a waiting room waiting to see if my husband has made it through the surgery, doing small talk, like my nerves will not handle it. And so she begged them to allow her to be alone with her thoughts, and her mother-in-law looked her in the eye and said, I will not honor that. Does that stop Hallie from showing up and being nice? Nope. She followed through, doing exactly what she said she was going to do. The Monday before her husband's surgery, she set up a lunch so she, her mother-in-law, and husband could all go out and just spend some time together before the procedure. She also kept updating the family, kept the line of communication open, even though she was going through the most scary time of her life. But behind Hallie's back, her mother-in-law reached out to her husband and tried to arrange a private Friday lunch, just the two of them without Hallie. So her husband canceled on his mom and took his wife to lunch on Monday instead. Surgery morning. 5:30 arrival time, 7 a.m. start time. They walked through the hospital doors together at 5:10, and his mom was already sitting there in the waiting room. Really quickly, the hospital staff, they scrambled. They got Hallie a separate waiting room. But this was the morning that her husband was going to undergo a life or death surgery, and Hallie was the one that had to be relocated. 5 months later, all is well with Hallie's husband. He's healthy and recovering. He meets with his mom for lunch every other month, but Hallie is no contact. The last conversation she had with her mother-in-law ended with her mother-in-law calling her a liar. Now, her husband is very neutral, which is pretty painful for Hallie, but what's really bothering her the most is that after everything she did over the 25 years, how hard she worked on this relationship, trying again and again, it still didn't work. And after all that she went through, she's still struggling with this choice. Did she try hard enough? She doesn't know. The only thing she knows for certain is that she cannot, will not go back to those 3 a.m. panic attacks. Oh my gosh, Hallie, I can safely say for all of us, you did more than enough to try to make this work. So you mentioned at the end that your husband stays neutral, which really isn't staying neutral. It hurts us when that happens. Like when you're the one getting repeatedly hurt in a conflict by someone in his family and they just stay in the middle, he's not really being fair to both sides. Like if I was in conflict with my husband's mom and she was treating me like your mother-in-law treated you, and he just said, oh, I just want to stay neutral, I want to have both of your sides, that's not being fair. Basically, he's not committing to my corner, and I'm just absorbing there. I'm just standing there absorbing all of his mom's darts, like her poor behavior. It's just landing on me, and he's not absorbing any of it. One woman I worked with described it as an ache of loneliness. You're married to someone who loves you deeply, but struggles to fully stand beside you. But I also want to name what he did. All those years when his mom tried to push onto your property, he stayed firm. And when you guys saw your mother-in-law digging around in your brother-in-law's private things, he took the key. When his mom tried to plan a private lunch behind Hallie's back, he said no and just took Hallie out instead. And on the morning of his surgery, in his most vulnerable time, I mean, how scary, when his mom showed up uninvited, he didn't defend it. He stood right by Hallie with the staff and moved his wife somewhere where she could breathe. So in the big moments that really matter, he has chosen his wife. He does need to do it in the smaller moments too, and maybe down the road they can sit down and process this chapter together, and maybe he would be able to say to her, you're right. You've carried this alone for a really long time, and I'm sorry. He can't take it back, but naming it out loud that does do a lot. Her husband is by no means failing her, but this could definitely get better if they get more aligned in the future. It would just feel a lot better. All right, Hallie, you already know why you're struggling with this. Every single thing you did to make this work, it didn't work. And that's a hard pill to swallow. Like, it's truly disorienting. You showed up. You tried. You sat through really uncomfortable dinners. You shielded your kids. You came home to a woman rearranging your home. You sat through hours of conversations trying to see each other's points, all to end up here. You 1000% did not fail. So for me, if I were you, I would be so grateful to the younger version of me, the one who was strong enough to stand outside of the frame so a family couldn't kick an innocent 6-year-old out of it, the one who shielded her kids from things coming out of your mother-in-law's mouth. I'd be so grateful to the version of me that cared enough to wake up at 3 a.m. to try to figure out, what am I doing wrong? How can I do it differently? How can I make this work? Because even though it's been 25 years and you have a lot of bad moments, I'm sure your family has made a lot of good memories as well, all because you were you. And now you've simply reached your limit. We all have one. You get to rest now, and you don't have to keep trying to figure this out. But before you rest, you're going to have to grieve. You're going to have to name out loud the things that she has done to you. And you're going to have to grieve the mother-in-law you deserved but never got, and accept the mother-in-law you have with distance. Sometimes at the end, that is the bravest step. It takes two people to hold up a relationship, and when one person is actively hitting on the other while the other one is holding everything up, you get to put the relationship down. I know you still love your mother-in-law. I know that. I know that you love your husband for loving his mom, and I know that as she ages, you are going to find a way to still support him just from the home front. Now let's talk about your mother-in-law. Some people have a very low ceiling on what they can offer emotionally. I don't believe these people are evil. I believe it is because of what happened to them when they were kids. Your mother-in-law sounds like she was operating at the very, very top of her system. When you clearly laid out in a very calm way that she destroyed something in your daughter, rather than taking a step back, reflecting, saying, I'm sorry, she deflected, denied, and justified. That's her showing you, this is all I got. I'm at my max capacity here. I'm not able to sit in your shoes. I'm not able to reflect on my behavior, and I'm not able to take accountability like an adult. So when someone behaves like that, they show me that they are operating with an emotional brain equivalent to a young child. Again, when you requested to be alone at the hospital because your relationship had deteriorated that much and you knew your nerves couldn't handle it, she crossed her arms and said, no. Basically, what about me? When you see a 3-year-old do this, it makes a lot of sense, but you would expect a 70-year-old to honor your request or at least be able to have a conversation about it. That's why this all looks so confusing. But you gotta know, this would have happened with whoever your husband married. The way your mother-in-law has treated you has absolutely nothing to do with you and everything to do with her own past and her own pain. There just isn't a conversation that can bust through a limited capacity ceiling. I mean, you did everything I would have asked you to do before creating distance. And in the end, you decided you are worth protecting. That makes you a woman who knows her limits. Now, as time progresses and your mother-in-law's health declines, your position may stay the same or it may change depending on how she ages cognitively. Again, this might not be direct care for your mother-in-law, but so many things happen behind the scene when we enter our parents' final season of life and we have to step up and care for them. I believe wholeheartedly when that time comes, you're gonna know how much you can give, when you've given too much, and when that happens, just take a step back, reevaluate, reestablish boundaries that you need, and continue. You know, Hallie, you signed your letter, Nice Girl Struggling. To me, you're so much more. You are a woman who has given so much to this family, to your family, and now you're just taking time, you're taking a breath to check in with yourself, and you're asking, what do I need? Thank you so much for sharing your story with us. I hope this helps, and please keep us posted.